Hello everyone, and welcome back to JAS Reviews. My name is James, and on this channel I do reviews of both music and movies, along with the occasional commentary piece, so if any of that sounds interesting to you, then please leave this video a like, and subscribe to my channel to see more content like that. And today I am going to be reviewing the newest of Kenneth Branagh's adaptation of Agatha Christie's mystery novels, A Haunting in Venice, which is also directed by him. Now, back when Death on the Nile came out, I did review that movie in a short review section, I believe, because I just didn't have a whole lot to say about it, and generally, I don't usually have a whole lot to say about these Kenneth Branagh adaptations of Agatha Christie novels. I would describe them as sort of comfort murder mystery movies. They definitely feel like something you would see back in the day. They feel very much so like they're paying tribute to old-fashioned murder mystery stories. I generally enjoyed the movies. I enjoyed Death on the Nile, and I semi-enjoyed Murder on the Orient Express, but I will say that they're not movies that are particularly memorable in any way, shape, or form. They do what they do well. They're visually pretty stunning movies, even with some of the obvious CGI in them in some places. And the cast performances are generally fine, although there's always been some weak links in each movie. I wasn't necessarily expecting anything special out of this Haunting in Venice movie until I saw the trailers for it. And the trailers sort of gave a totally different vibe for this one. It looks a lot more horror-centric, with a lot more uncomfortable scares and eerie moments in it. And the trailer even seemed to imply that there could be a sort of supernatural element in the movie, which we had not seen in the previous two movies. And even that Hercule Poirot was not going to necessarily be the confident detective that we had known from the past two films. In the build-up to the movie, I got more intrigued because I read that this movie was a very loose adaptation of another later Agatha Christie novel called Halloween Party that was critically not very well received in its time. People appreciated it as something that Agatha Christie wrote older in her age, but it was not a Poirot novel that was particularly well liked, and the mystery just wasn't as interesting to people. So it sounded like this movie was going to be changing a lot about the book and just be a super loose adaptation about it more than anything else. And it once again features Hercule Poirot, once again played by Kenneth Branagh. He's retired in this movie, and he's now living in exile in the world's most glamorous city, in Venice. But Poirot, sort of pushed on by a friend of his who is an author, he attends a seance at a haunted palazzo. But when one of the guests is murdered there, he is put into a world where he isn't sure what is real and what is not. Poirot is a skeptic at heart and doesn't think that the seance that is happening is real, but then when the person who is performing the seance is murdered, things are not exactly as they seem in the movie. So what did I think about Haunting in Venice? Well, let's talk about it. First of all, I'm just going to come right out of the gate and say this. This is easily the best of the three Kenneth Branagh Agatha Christie adaptations that I've seen, no contest. This is the first one that I would say I could see myself returning back to, and I think it would be especially a great one to return back to during the Halloween season, because it just has those perfect sort of gothic horror vibes in it. Now, I did say that the first two movies were both visually great, even with some of the flawed CGI, but this one, its visuals, in my opinion, are on another level. I just really love how they filmed Venice. It looks both beautiful when it needs to, but eerie when it is necessary. It is a truly cool set piece to have. The haunted house, especially where the majority of the action takes place, pretty much all of it in fact, is such a cool location, and they really take advantage of it. It does feel like a classic murder mystery, but this time with a horror twist. This one takes itself pretty seriously in a lot of places, and it's not the lighthearted, easy viewing affair that the first two are, in my opinion. Now, I'm not gonna say that it's like death-defyingly scary or anything like that. It's not, and that's not what I was expecting out of this movie. I wasn't expecting a constant jump scare fest, and I'm sort of glad that's not what we got. Instead, we got what was actually a pretty grounded mystery that was still intriguing, and unlike the first two, With this one, it constantly kept me on my toes. I liked that this movie kept me on my toes and kept me unsure. And that helped the movie lean into its horror vibe more. You just weren't sure what was going on, and you were in the same position as Poirot was, where you were constantly questioning things and questioning what was real and what was not. Was Hercule actually seeing these spiritual entities that we see through his perspective in the movie, or is he an unreliable narrator? It's sort of an interesting idea to follow along with, and it helps create the scares and make them feel effective. The visuals helps a lot in that regard, as well as the camera angles. I mean, man, talk about some unsettlingly weird camera angles that really make you feel on edge at all times. The camera at a lot of times is positioned in these super weird, almost at the top of the head camera angles, but not exactly, and at a super weird angle where it doesn't feel like a camera angle that makes sense, but that makes it all the more unsettling, and it makes it work very well. And there's properly timed shaky cam in the movie as well, when we're sort of following Hercule Poirot and his sort of uncertainty with what's going on. And like I said, the central mystery is interesting, and I think that is helped by this movie being the first one in the series, in my opinion, where pretty much all the cast is really interesting. In the past two, I felt that there were characters that just weren't interesting at all or felt sort of inconsequential, and because of that, you were able to sort of easily eliminate them as being suspects in the murder. Whereas in this one, I felt like all the characters had an intriguing motivation as to why they could have killed the person who got murdered, and they were also characters who had interesting arcs that they went through. I feel like no character necessarily stayed the same at the end of the movie, which was a sort of nice character arc for the people to have in it. Even Hercule Poirot had a sort of character arc in this movie, which I feel like he really didn't in the first two, but we actually get to see a sort of exploration of his psyche in this one, which is pretty cool. I really liked Tina Fey as Ariadne Oliver, who is Hercule's friend. Her character is pretty unpredictable, and you're not exactly sure what her motivation is. I also liked Riccardo Scamarcio as Vitale, a sort of cop that Branagh works with. He is a pretty interesting character too, and while he doesn't have that many lines, I really liked following along with him and found him to be pretty intriguing. Kelly Reilly was great as Rowena Drake, the mother of the character who Hercule is investigating the murder of initially. She is really interesting and has a lot of sort of depths to her that you don't initially see on first glance, but as the movie keeps going, it becomes more and more intriguing as to what's really going on with her. Jude Hill is also great in this. He is a really good child performer, definitely one of the strongest child performances I've seen this year, and he has a sort of unique chemistry with Poirot. And Jamie Dornan is great here, as well as Dr. Leslie Ferrier. This is a different type of role for Dornan to play. It's much more reserved and much more frightened, but I really like what he did here, and his character was easily the one that created a lot of sympathy, as he had PTSD from being in the army. And it was really sort of tragic to watch what he was going through, but it made him a very sympathetic character, and I overall really liked him. Michelle Yeoh in here was great as the person that was performing the seance, Mrs. Reynolds. She wasn't in the movie for super long, but she was a huge highlight. Now, as far as critiques go for this movie, I think the main one, which also helps to lend to the movie being a little bit more fun, but it is also admittedly a flaw, is that the mystery here, the reveal of the mystery and the explanation of it, isn't quite as airtight as Murder on the Orient Express or Death on the Nile. It's not one that makes quite as much sense, and there's a couple things that happen in the movie where it's like, well, I guess you could explain it away with this thing, but there's some things that feel maybe a little bit too convenient with the mystery, and it does feel like this one requires a lot more explanation than the other two did, where the mystery was happening right in front of your eyes. But I guess that's part of the disadvantage of having some supernatural elements present. But nevertheless, that does make the reveal here a little harder to buy than the other two, but it's not something that really left me not enjoying the movie much. I still enjoyed the movie, even with the acknowledgement that that mystery element just didn't work as well as it did in the other two movies. I also did find two characters in here to not be super intriguing in the cast, and they were ones that were very easy to say that they did not end up doing the murder, which were the brother and sister characters. I think the actors did a fine job portraying each of these characters, but I didn't find them to be super interesting outside of their sympathetic story about them being immigrants. But Other than that, they didn't really have much to do in the movie. I also do think that the movie takes maybe a little bit to really pick up and become interesting. There is a lot of buildup in the movie, and I understand there needs to be some exposition and whatnot, but I feel like it takes them a little bit too long to get to the point of the movie. And some of the buildup feels maybe ever so slightly unnecessary and like they could have condensed it a little bit. But once we do get to the central plot of the movie, it becomes a lot more fun to watch and one that I enjoyed. And yeah, overall, I would say my main feeling with this movie was enjoyment. I had a lot of fun with it. It's not a super deep movie or anything like that, and it's not like the mystery is one that is super just crazy or out there or anything like that, but it was interesting that the mystery had some supernatural elements to it and that it was harder to figure out. And I also like that the movie didn't necessarily say that the supernatural elements didn't exist at all, which is what I was figuring it would do because of who Poirot is as a character. But I like that it didn't necessarily confirm that in the movie, and that helps make it just a little bit more eerie. For all those reasons, I'm going to give this movie a strong 3.5 out of 5 stars. This is one that is going to be easy to return to for Halloween, and I'm sure I'm going to be doing so in years to come. So yeah, that was my review of A Haunting in Venice. What were your thoughts on this movie? Let me know in the comments down below. And once again, my name is James, and I do reviews of both music and movies, along with the occasional commentary piece on this channel. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, then please leave this video a like and subscribe to my channel to see more content like that. But until then, I will see you all in the next video.